The final ban list of the year has finally arrived, and with that, the Reign of Fire is officially over, with Snake Eyes being not really viable anymore, and Tenpai also on the way out. A whole new bunch of decks will be played in the upcoming year of Yu-Gi-Oh! But there's more to this ban list than just the simplification of Fire dead, new decks live on. There's a lot of nuance and things that change that I feel like are worth talking about. So let's get into an in-depth discussion about the ban list, how it'll affect the future of the game, as well as what things I felt like were done right and what could have used improvement. Before I begin, if you guys enjoy these types of discussion videos going over the state of the game and many of the other surrounding aspects of Yu-Gi-Oh, then please let me know. Like, subscribe, as well as comment down below that you enjoyed it, as well as your thoughts on the matters and anything else you want to see in the future. But with that said, let's talk about the ban list. So if you missed it, let's go over real quick what happened with the ban list. Now, one of the most important aspects of the ban list was not the contents itself, but what happened with its presentation. Instead of the normal just posting on a website, it was announced that it would be up on the YCS live stream after the finals was played. Only given a couple hours notice, but still. And then a whole skit was played out where on stream we got to see the ban list revealed with some theatrics. And then during that skit, we got to find all of these things out. For example, going to Unlimited, or to 3, are all of the Dragon Rulers, finally released from their prison. They'll probably never end up there again. Lunalight Tiger also went to 3, Pancratops as well, Rescue Ace Airlifter, Thunder Dragon Colossus, If the World Chalice Justicar, and Opening of the Spirit Gates. Interestingly, that one had just been limited. What had gone to 2 was Cyberjar, Danger Jackalope, Danger Tsuchinoko, Ava, and Perform Pal Monkey Board. Going to 1 was Tenpai Dragon Chandra, Phantom of Yubel, Sangan Kaiman, and Zodiac Barrage. And lastly, getting forbidden was Gimmick Puppet Nightmare, Jago the Spiritualist, and Original Sinful Spoils, Snake Eye. Okay, the first thing I wanted to talk about here is, again, not pertaining to the actual contents of the list. Let's talk about the idea of the cinematics and theatrics, that went into play for the reveal of this ban list. It's something that I wish Konami had done for a long time, and I can say it didn't disappoint. I'm very happy they did it, and I hope that they see all of the hype and praise that's been going around, and they do this again. Because when Konami releases lists like this, it's exciting for the viewer base. It creates engagement and makes things exciting, and that's exactly what you want to see as a community, right? There's no reason not to do it. Even if it requires a little more work and setup, and the stream has to go a little longer, I think it is all fine and dandy. Now, another important thing I want to discuss about the release of the ban list is that while doing it on stream, there are a little bits of risks involved. For example, when they've released a Forbidden and Limited list during a YCS before, and they've done it before. We saw it during YCS Guadalajara this year, as well as in the past year at YCS Philadelphia. Both of which came in the middle of day one, or early day one. And the problem with them releasing the ban list during the YCS is that it kind of invalidates the current YCS. It undercuts the significance of the person who wins that and people's success. And I think it feels kind of shitty for players. So I'm very happy that they waited till afterwards so that they gave Steven the chance to relish in his win for a bit. The spotlight wasn't stolen from him from the beginning. I mean, it didn't have that long before people turned to the ban list, but still, I feel like it gave a better chance for everything to play out properly and have their own time to shine. Where in Philadelphia, the topic or the story of the weekend was not that Dennis Nadas had won a YCS. It was that Mindhacker was banned. So yeah, while I think for this YCS, I do think both kind of storylines got their chance to shine, and I think that's awesome. So huge props to Konami for, I feel like, actually improving on something, because we give Konami a lot of shit, and while there's still things that can maybe get better, when they actually do make strides for improvement, I am happy to give my respect and to commend Konami. So thumbs up. But now let's get into the critiques, because that's pretty much the biggest extent I have for praise for everything that's happened. The content of the list, I feel like, could have been better. Let's talk about the context of the format before the ban list hit. Right, so obviously YCS Anaheim is played under the old ban list. In that ban list, the best deck was clearly Ryzeal, and following behind was Maliss. A predictable, albeit like now solidified, state of the meta that proved that Fire's time had run out. The previous list had compounded a bit, and new decks had power crept it to the point where Snake Eye, while not an unplayable deck, was not going to be the main tier 1 threat anymore. And Tenpai as well. Tenpai, a little more due to positioning, just because I feel like it had a really bad Ryzeal matchup, and the fact that every single deck was playing multiple barriers, some playing more with thrust or trap tricks, compounded to make Tenpai fall into the back. Despite it getting second, its representation among top cut was significantly lower than it had been ever since its release. Did Snake Eye need to get hit that hard? Did Tenpai need to get hit that hard? Was this list actually like needed? And honestly, no. I do think that Tenpai probably needed to get hit, if not now, later, because once the format kind of stacked up in a way that Tenpai didn't have bad matchups, it would go on to be kind of cancerous again. So that one I feel less poorly about. Snake Eyes, however, despite all my disdain, I feel like the aggressive hits to Snake Eye weren't warranted. You know, Original does do a lot to hurt Snake Eyes. And not just Snake Eyes, but any Fire level 1 deck that would use Snake Eyes as a vehicle for accessing their own engine with more consistency and extension. That not being an option anymore, it hurts. It very much hurts these decks that are now going to have to find something else they can do to cope with it. And if these weren't going to be meta threats, then I don't think it was a huge problem that they needed to address. And specifically what I don't like about this whole arrangement from them is they reprinted a lot of the high rarity or expensive cards for the Snake Eye deck in the last few months as reprints, as selling points. I myself included made a budget deck profile using Fire King. And that deck was very good before Crossover Breakers, and even post Crossover Breakers, it had gotten worse as a result of power creep, but it was still a viable option. Now it is not. Like, there's no fix. I got asked a couple times in the video, how do you fix the Fire King budget deck with OSS being banned? You can't. You need to either play pure Fire King now, which is significantly worse, or just drop the deck. There isn't a solution. And I think it only serves to hurt budget players more, right? Because if people are doing the budget decks, they're not wanting to put that much money into the game, or they can't afford to. And that's okay. I'm not trying to say it isn't. But if that's what's happening, then Konami immediately invalidating and making all their money go to waste is super shitty. Those players are going to want to not to reinvest, and they're going to want to just not play the game. And that really I think is a bad strategy on Konami's behalf for the health of the game, right? Because Yu-Gi-Oh isn't all competitive, and I'm sure many of the people watching this are not hyper competitive players. They're more in the middle, where they play a lot casually. They know what the meta is, but they don't travel to events. They don't play YCSs to the degree like I do, and this hurts those type of players. So I think this is a big mistake. While I am one kind of pushing the idea that Snake Eyes had its time and shouldn't be a tier 1 threat anymore, there are ways to curb a deck and keep it out of tier 1 without completely nuking it. As well as nuking the supporting decks, right? Because Rescue Ace and Fire King also, I guess, Evils as well. Anything with level 1 fires, original that would have access, is now axed. As well as now bridging the Snake Eye, Azamina, and Dibalstar theme kind of becomes not possible. There's also a weird thing, so lore-wise, it's also kind of rough, but I mean, that's not my expertise, so I won't dwell on that topic. I think Konami should have taken the OCG approach, ironically, to make this deck better, which is hitting some of the power consistency cards, right? Like putting Wanted to 1, for example, could have been fine, because putting Wanted to 1, what that accomplishes is means now the deck is a little less consistent, as well as it's not as powerful off the rip. Wanted is still searchable later on in the combo, but now you don't open Wanted as a way of pushing through things. And Wanted versus Witch is a noticeable difference, especially as you're playing through fields and you get to immediately use Wanted to draw. It specifically matters when you go like Wanted, Witch, set Original, and use Original. Then if you get Ashed, you get a draw to replace itself, where with the Witch, you wouldn't have done that immediately. And it makes the hand trap immediately more effective. And I think something like that to just weaken it a bit would have kept it relevant in the game, where these players who invested money into it wouldn't feel like they're now pushed out, but also would have made it that Snake Eye wouldn't ever claim a top spot again. I don't think if Snake Eyes had 1 or 2 or 3 top cuts for the next few months as it continued to get power crept out, if people would have been mad. People are mad when it's tier 0 or when it's 10 plus spaces in top cut. And that's understandable. And ironically, as I played Anaheim and I played Snake Eye because I didn't have time to look at the new decks, I played no mirror matches. I actually had fun with Snake Eye. I think the Snake Eye mirror match is really, really bad. But when you're playing with other decks, it actually was pretty fun. I enjoyed the Snake Eye deck, which is pretty hypocritical to say considering how anti-Snake Eye I've been. But obviously when it's the best deck and all you play is Snake Eye mirrors, it kind of sucks. So there was an ironic kind of thing that I noted throughout the weekend, was that I was actually enjoying Snake Eye when I wasn't playing mirror matches. But yeah, I think this overall was too aggressive of a push from Konami, and it's more symbolic than anything to kind of denote the end of Fire's reign. But I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm playing more Master Duel that I've been coming more in line with Master Duel and OCG's philosophy. But this wasn't the time for an aggressive hit. If there was going to be an aggressive hit, it should have been in September. Where after Nationals and the power level was extremely high, you bring it down a fair bit. And then the next would come out in December, Crosshair Breakers. We'd have an entirely new meta. And then over time, you'd start releasing the Snake Eye stuff off the list because it would no longer be a tier 0, tier 1 threat. Not thrilled with that. Now, on the topic of Snake Eyes, how do you go about fixing Snake Eyes moving forward? So if you've ever played pure Snake Eye, or I say pure, but Fiendsmith and Azamina Snake Eye, I'm also counting in the same vein. Decks that don't play other Fire engines. You note that original, while important and very good, is not the most impactful thing, because Snake Eye cards can access each other fairly easily still, right? Like if you open up just Snake Eye Ash, oftentimes you would get Temple, and you wouldn't even access, original. You wouldn't need to access it. And that technically hasn't changed. It does mean you are significantly weaker to hand traps as well. And this is the more important one. Now you aren't accessible via cards like Black Witch, the Azamina cards, all those. So your consistency went from pretty okay, because the deck wasn't crazy consistent, to now pretty much nothing. But I think you can build upon the way that Temple was used as your way of accessing names, because Temple accesses it slowly, or in an awkward position, but it does access your cards from deck. I immediately started thinking about, how do I play my Crystal Beast deck? Because it uses Snake Eye cards. I still want to use Snake Eye cards because Temple was the better Snake Eye card for my deck anyways. I know they're Fire Engine. Half the time I didn't even use original. And what I thought is, with Snake Eye's Damned Dragon coming out, there are interesting play patterns you can do, specifically in my Crystal Beast deck. And this can also work in other decks as well. But with 2 level 4s, you can turn that into Banshee. Banshee for Poplar. Poplar, get Temple. Temple, then place Snake Eye's Oak. Or it could be Ash if you want to search level 1 Fire that is not in theme, and then try to get out of your hand later, which you can get to, and I'll explain in a second. And from there, what we're going to do is we are going to link 2 for Cross Sheep, and Poplar will place itself in Small Trap Card Zone. And now with the Ash or the Oak in Small Trap Card Zone plus the Poplar, you can send both off for Damn Dragon. You can Fusion Summon it. Cross Sheep can then revive the monster you sent, Ash or Oak, and then trigger their effects and get into your Snake Eye plays pretty effectively, to be honest, as well as you can then bridge into Fiendsmith. And what's good about this is, if you get Effect Veiler or Impermed on the Cross Sheep, you can push through by activating or linking the Cross Sheep and the Damn Dragon off for Princess. And then if you want to get your cards out of the hand, and you got Ash, for example, then you can go sack off for Flame Burge, make Saryuja. And with Saryuja, you can special from hand, so that you get access to Onyx. Now, all of this does require us to wait until the new set, Supreme Darkness, comes out, which will be a month away. But while the initial instinct is that Fire is dead, I think with some innovation and behind some rank 4 packages, whether it's Crystal Beasts or Melodious or Super Heavy Samurais, maybe we still can find something to do with Fire and Snake decks. I know I sent in a whole spiel about how I wasn't happy with Konami killing it and killing original, and I still think this is maybe too aggressive of a hit. I wanted to give you guys a little bit of hope that I think there are cool ways to build around this, and I'm excited to do that. And that's something we will do on the channel once Supreme Darkness rolls around, because until then, I think all the Fire decks are completely just unplayable. Like, straight up, just don't waste your time. But okay, besides the whole Fire shtick, right? The love and hate, the bad business practices, the evolution of Fire. That's not the only story with this list, right? With Ryzeal and Maliss already being the dominant decks, nothing changes moving forward. We were looking to see if some of the primary engines being used in decks throughout 2024 would get hit and being used in Ryzeal and Maliss. They were not. Of course, I'm alluding to Cash Tier and Fiendsmith cards. We saw both engines still get top cut in higher numbers, more so than the number of Snake Eyes that were there, because, well, many other decks play them. And then Cash Fiendsmith is literally a deck as well now, which has kind of cemented itself as a mainstay, even getting several top cut spots now, or pure Fiendsmith with Josh's case, where the other old guard decks fell off completely. And I'd reckon the Fiendsmith like pure decks had less representation than Snake Eye decks, interestingly. I can argue that there's some bias there with player quality. I think most of the better players would have not played Snake Eye variants, but maybe also I didn't notice. So I'm not going to get too much into that, but it's interesting that Fiendsmith and Cashier cards weren't hit at all. And maybe this is more of a recent plea that the community's had to touch Unicorn and get it away from competitive play. But I feel like it's a remark that has been said for a while. At least I've kind of said that I think this is a bit overtuned for going first, and going second and your opponent summoning Unicorn feels really gross. I think Fenrir is a lot better. For example, I think Fenrir in the context of Maliss is pretty cool because it helps going second. And going first with Fenrir, it does help you play through Veil and Imperm by making plays, but it's not nearly as devastating as Unicorn. That one I think is too over the top in its ability. Fenrir is utility and it's applicable and flexible still, but not nearly as grossly powerful as Unicorn is. It's the multi-bodies, it's the rip apart the grave and rip apart the extra deck that compounds into something a bit cancerous, in my opinion. I am anti-Unicorn, if that wasn't very clear. And as for the Fiendsmith cards, I actually really enjoyed the Fiendsmith cards, so I did not want to see them hit. I find it very interesting that with Fiendsmith getting more and more play, how we've not gravitated back towards a bestial metagame, even not in the side deck. Like, I was a bit surprised that players like Josh didn't at least include a couple bestials in their side deck for more Fiendsmith heavy mirrors, because those always felt like some of the absolute strongest cards in those game states. Like, we saw that in July, and it was clear to me at least that we were shifting back towards Fiendsmith dominance. Not seeing those at all in people's decks, I thought was kind of interesting. But I do think that with Fiendsmith avoiding the list here, we should start preparing a little more for bestials once more. Obviously, Maliss is already playing bestials, and maybe they'll increase their counts or side more to reflect them actually being better non-engine cards now. But on the topic of Fiendsmith as well, Fiendsmith wasn't just used as its own deck now. We've seen successfully being used to win the YCS in Ryzeal. Something that initially I discredited as not being very good. I was wrong, happily to say that. I kind of just said how I hadn't had enough time to test for the event, and that's why I played Snake Eyes. And I still want to do more research before I can give you guys really great opinions on the Fiendsmith engine in Ryzeal, but it worked for several players, and it's something we are going to have to look out for. Something that's cool that I saw people doing that Triff didn't do was playing the Link 3 Fiendsmith like Monday in their Ryzeal deck. And why that's pretty good is you can Desi-Ray and then get rid of the Monday, and then bring it back in your opponent's turn with Lacrima to get the Desi-Ray. But also with the Desi-Ray is you can attach it to Detonator with Detonator's effect. And then when you use Detonator to send or detach the Desi-Ray, you get 2 pops. And then on your opponent's turn, Lacrima, the Agmonday to get back Desi-Ray. And you can see the chain of events here is incredibly powerful and good into talents and into breakers. And that's something that I had not, known about before the event. And I thought was a pretty good development in strategy for dealing with breakers as far as being a Ryzeal player goes. As well as Lacrima just being a good card, because cycling into Lacrima and then doing Fiendsmith stuff later before being locked into rank 4s was nice, because Lacrima itself is level 4, meaning you can pivot back into the rank 4 access. Not the most freely, but free enough. And I thought that was really good. That type of development in the game, I think, is interesting. I love when there's innovation there. I also think that there's more to explore with this deck as built and optimized, as well as Bestials and Nibiru become better in Ryzeal, because now you can link them off for Underworld or Moon, Close Sky, and then proceed into Fiendsmith plays or convert them into a 4 via Lacrima and make it all bridge together in a more meaningful and actual beneficial way. Because before, something Nibiru and or Bestial in the Ryzeal deck kind of feel kind of awkward. But cards that weren't that popular this event or felt less popular than before were cards like Droll and Fulos. But those cards are all really impactful versus Fiendsmith. So if we are proceeding into a Fiendsmith dominated meta once again, these tech cards will become stronger, and it could edge the format to a point where now you actually have to make a meta based call between which event and which version of Ryzeal is better. Because in the immediate wake of Anaheim, if people start playing Fulos, Droll, and Bestials a lot more, then I reckon going to the more non-engine heavy, sturdy, we'll call it, and stable regular version of Ryzeal, then leaving it at that might actually be the way to play. Although I imagine as people's valuations of a non-engine shifts from event to event, that will determine which version will be the best at any given time. I look forward to exploring it though, and same with any other innovations within Ryzeal. There is one other innovation that is not the craziest in terms of TCG, and it was something we saw in OCG as well, and that is the small Jark package playing Jark. I say Jark? Shark. Playing Surfacing Big Jaws and Drake Shark, which is cool because it's something else that you can search via 7th Tachyon in OCG or Small World in TCG, which is very similar. And then eventually we'll get 7th Tachyon as well. But you search it, and if you use a spell this turn, it can summon itself and search Shark Drake and Shark Drake, or Drake Shark, sorry. It'll summon itself like a Poplar. No search though, that'd be too good. And get access to rank 4. It's something that I have tested 0, as well as I'm not sure how prominent it was at the YCS, and nor do I think it would be as prominent until 7th Tachyon comes out. It is something that is worth exploring as another form of variation upon Ryzeal. In that version, you wouldn't want to play Desires, however, same as with the Fiendsmith version. And ironically, talking to some of the players playing Ryzeal this weekend, they said Desires was really bad in the mirror because, like in Zodiac, you got rid of your grind game a lot. Even if you didn't banish the one-ofs like plug-in or cross, just losing your names meant in a mirror match sometimes you get out-resourced, and that was dangerous. As an alternative to Desires to make up for consistency, maybe this is a path we are to be taking in the future. So I'm excited to see how Ryzeal changes in this new format. Obviously, the Banlist did effectively nothing to change how Ryzeal plays, but that doesn't impact how I still wanted to talk about it and see, in the wake of Anaheim, where to go with it. I feel like from this point, people weren't preparing for Snake Eyes already. Anybody who did play Shifter on their side deck probably will not anymore, because now there's even less you really need it for. And yeah, although that being said, I guess if people are playing Fiendsmith Ryzeal, then maybe Maliss will play Shifter still for those decks. Because, yeah, that's where Yu-Gi-Oh's fun. More things to discover. Okay, I wanted to talk about Maliss as well. Maliss did have its breakout, appearance here, and it did solid. It obviously did not hold up to the same level of Ryzeal, as well as once getting into Top Cut, it did fall off a little more aggressively. Now, one tournament being a sample size may not be enough to determine that Ryzeal is significantly stronger. I'm not sure if that's true. I personally think Ryzeal's better, but Maliss was still there. It still showed it was a threat to be reckoned with. And we saw several different variations. We saw the Sky Striker version and Cashier package both being played. Pack and Gibriel, even though Pack didn't top, played a more aggressive Striker version with allures and draw power. Ironically, if you guys are signed up to my Patreon, you'll know that I talked about this, those two engines, as something I was considering in my Maliss deck about a month ago when I was looking at first impressions of the format and how to do problem solving. I was going to also have a classroom for the event, and I do that monthly for my apprentice tier patrons. But with, if you guess you haven't been following, with my account getting hacked, my email, my Patreon, my YouTube, I kind of had to postpone that, and I didn't have time to test because of that. But normally, yes, I will give you guys, for any of these new sets, extra early opinions on that Patreon, as well as classrooms. But yeah, if you're interested in that and learning and getting my opinions extra early, please go make sure to check out the Patreon, and it'll give me some support. But yeah, so Maliss was interesting. And so my kind of analysis of the format when I was first looking into it, and I unfortunately haven't progressed much from this point, but my idea was to beat Ryzeal, you need to accomplish two things, going second. And that is, one, you need to stop Duo Drive. Trying to beat them after Duo Drive resolves is significantly harder than if not. They have better follow-up, they have better card economy, they have significantly more interrupts, and then significantly more flexibility in how they interact with you. So ideally, you make sure you always have a hand trap like Valor, Impermanence, or Ash, or Droll, which is why I thought Droll would be more popular for this event than it was, to stop Duo Drive. Because if you can't stop it, probably over. But if you stop Duo Drive, unless your engine is particularly good into Detonator, it still might not be enough, because you next need to deal with Detonator. And most decks that could have dealt with Detonator would have needed the Graveyard to push through. And guess what deck can make a rank 4 that stops Graveyard effects? Ryzeal. It can make Dweller. You can't even play like a Graveyard effect deck to try and deal with Detonator. And with that in mind, the general idea for me was I want to find something in the Maliss deck, or it would have been for any deck, that can fill two purposes in one. So it can either beat Detonator, or it can beat Duo Drive, or it can be an extender or consistency for my deck, or do either one of the other two things, right? You want to maximize flexibility and utility in your deck. That was the concept of what I was talking about. And I promise this will make sense. So like Impermanence is fantastic, one of the best cards right now, because it hits Duo Drive or Detonator. It can be used in either capacity, and you have the flexibility to do either of those things. When you formulate your game plan against Ryzeal, when you're looking at your 5-card hand, Impermanence can be either or, and that's why it's fantastic right now. So I was looking for other cards that had that same level of flexibility, cards that could be used as a way to beat Detonator or as way of extension. And Cashier cards can do that, right? If I summon Unicorn, or I summon Fenrir and you Detonator it, I search Unicorn, summon Unicorn. You can do Detonator that as well. There I get Birth. Birth, Detonator again. Okay, that's all 3 Detonators gone with 1 card, which by all intents and purposes is the same as Impermanent. If I let it resolve, let me search off Fenrir and I go Battle Phase. I have to burn a card to do this, but I can go Fenrir attack and Banish to force out Detonator again. Answers there, as well as it gives me the body to bridge into SP to also deal with Detonator. And that's the really cool part about the Cashier cards. And the Striker cards fill the same purpose, right? You can engage for Widowmaker to negate Detonator. And both engines can be used to generate bodies going first, which is all Maliss needs as extension, right? To go into the Lizard Haggardos or into SP to banish cards from the grave and build up into Maliss links. In the Striker case, obviously you engage with Hornet Drones, Kagari add back the Hornet Drones, and you have 2 bodies. Or with Cashier cards, Fenrir being 1 body, or Unicorn providing 2. Both those packages were popular in Maliss this weekend. And I feel like those are for sure the ways to get going, as well as if there's anything else in Yu-Gi-Oh that can do that similar type of dual purpose, then they will also be popular in the coming formats. It's something that I look out for when I'm deck building and trying to break a fresh meta that I thought was cool and worth mentioning, and to see if anything else comes out. In my video that I talked about on Patreon, I also mentioned Instant Fusion as a viable option. Instant Fusion is a body, or it can make Thousand Eyes restrict to force the Detonator. Important to note, the Instant Fusion is a 1, so it's 1 extra deck spot for 1 main deck card, and that's the biggest thing holding that back from being a viable option. But it's that type of logic that is worth going. Another option to talk about is Vishuda, not Tenpai, Tenyi. Vishuda, similar-ish. You will trade the Monk into the Detonator, but it'll bounce back the Detonator, which is pretty good. Or if you go first, it can just summon itself and the body. So yeah, all those things are ways that Maliss can proceed. And personally, as I played Maliss, Maliss's weak spot felt like going second. It felt almost like Yubel, where it wasn't bad going second, but it really wasn't insane. It was clearly worse than Ryzeal going second. Going first, however, was much stronger. Typically in Yu-Gi-Oh, we want to have more of a balance, and that's why I think Ryzeal is better. But in order to make Maliss a better deck and to improve and to innovate Maliss, what I'm looking for Maliss to step up is to fix that going second problem, without making it unplayable going first. And that's where I've drawn all of my ideas from, and where I'm curious to see what else people will change in the future. I really think that Yu-Gi-Oh still has a lot of innovation to go over this upcoming format. So while people can be kind of mad that this balance really didn't change anything, Yu-Gi-Oh didn't need changing right now. We're in a fresh new format. We have a lot to discover, and at least for now, I have no problems with the current meta game, and I'm excited to see where things go. But okay, beyond Ryzeal and Maliss, let's keep the discussion going, because we got a lot of breakdown of the wake of the 2 events, or the YCS and the ban list to talk about. Yubel. Yubel's a deck that I feel like has always been underrepresented when other decks were available in the meta. Partially because it's harder, I think, to do your combos. You need to be a little more flexible with playing around hand traps. And I think people don't like it, truthfully. I don't know if that's an astute assessment. That's more subjective than objective. I'll say that. The deck did not get hit that drastically, right? And Yubel was kind of like all these side threats to Snake Eyes, because it functioned very similar, where it felt insane going first. You had to hand trap them early or did nothing, and they were still playable going second. And with Snake Eye getting butchered, Yubel didn't. And ironically, with Phantom going to 1, gets worse, you still have the same ability to protect your turn 1 from hand traps, though, even if your turn 1 becomes a little bit worse if you can't recycle the Phantom. You actually end up getting better because now Spirit Gates is at 3. And Spirit Gates is one of the best extenders for a deck that has kind of ever existed, so getting that back to 3 is huge. I almost wonder if it's a boost rather than a negative for Yubel. And I think Yubel might be a strong contender for the format. I think it's probably still weaker than Maliss and Ryzeal, as power creep has taken its place, but as far as a viable option goes, it probably holds its own pretty good. Like I'd reckon even 3rd best deck, to be honest. And you have to remember that Phantom now is not like one and done. There are many ways to recycle it. You just have to be a little more conscious about doing so. Some include recycling with the Unchained Link monsters that when destroyed add back a Fiend. or with Nightmare Throne. And I'm sure many people who practice their combos will find out ways to sacrifice a body that either of those effects would have generated in your turn 1 to cycle back a Phantom that maybe had to get used earlier on to negate, say, Ash. And all the Yubel fans will be quick to spreadsheet and lab that out. I'm sure. But I think Yubel actually is in a pretty good position here. And if you, if that was the deck you invested in over the last format and you're worried about what to do to keep up, I think Yubel honestly does fine. So you don't need to rush to pick up one of the new decks in order to keep up with metagame. Even if your deck's a little bit worse, it's like you can still easily win a regional top YCS with Yubel, I think, if you're good with it, obviously. But yeah, Yubel, you know, I think it's fine when Konami does this. The deck will be good, but it's not going to be the omnipresent main tier 1 threat like it was in September. And I hope Konami never lets that happen again, because I didn't like it when it was the best deck. I felt like it wasn't a very helpful, dominant best deck. Very helpful, very healthy, dominant best deck. It being in the sideline position is not necessarily the worst. Maybe I'll come to eat my own words later, but for now, I think it's not the biggest deal. And I kind of feel like they should have taken this approach with Snake Eye. Because that way people who bought the deck don't feel like they've been ripped off a little bit later. It is important for Konami that if they hit Ryzeal and Maliss later, they don't set it up so that Yubel becomes this shitty tier 1 omnipresent, you know, cancer to deal with again. I have faith, I think, in Konami not to let that happen. And I'm curious to see how Yubel continues to go, as well as if it changes now that it's not kind of dealing with Snake Eye as a main threat, where it will be positioned. And then the other deck that was also hit on the ban list was Tenpai, and it got hit really hard. And now, you know, I was more happy with Yubel hits than the Snake Eye hits, and I didn't like Snake Eye dying immediately. I am happy with Tenpai hits. Even if it wasn't the biggest threat right now, I think it could have been later. And the reason why is it's not Tenpai's engine directly that makes it like so crazy. It's its non-engine. The fact that Tenpai's engine is built in a way where it complements all the really cancerous non-engine cards, as well as the fact that it's really hard to interact with, meant that unless they permanently release decks that could interact with Tenpai easy, then Tenpai would have continued bouts of being a problem for the game. So that's not great. And as Konami has worked towards making going second more balanced with the Mulch armies, as well as designing decks that maybe aren't as crazy, then I think that they don't need a deck which is supposed to balance going second like Tenpai, because it really is more polarizing than just that. It's kind of just says you lose immediately, you don't play. So yeah, I am happy that our aggressive hits with Tenpai. I think this is the correct approach, and I didn't want them to see Tenpai pop up from time to time as it became favorable in metagames once again, because that easily could have been that way. In the way where Striker pops up because Striker just has good matchups into certain types of card effects, like for example things that have heavy interactions with monsters but not spells, enable Striker a chance to thrive. So that's why Striker oftentimes randomly pops up. Tenpai would be similar, not for the same reasons, but it'd pop up frequently when formats allowed it because a lot of decks can't interact with them. Striker, however, is a healthy deck and it's not cancerous, so that deck coming back from time to time is not a problem. Tenpai, which says you don't get to play the game against it, you just lose immediately, take 30,000 damage, is a problem when it keeps coming back. Anyways, enough Tenpai ranting for now. I'm happy to see it gone, and I know some of you people don't know how to let things go. We'll still try and play it, so have fun. I'm not going to help you there. Lastly, Konami did one other thing that is good, and that is hitting some floodgates, Yugioh and Nightmare getting banned. I obviously will always ask for more, and Konami knows what to hit. They've proven that when they've had custom ban lists for influencer tournaments where cards like Fossil Dyna and such are banned. I really wish Konami was more aggressive with this, but I'll take any progress, you know, where I can. So Nightmare and Yugioh getting banned is great. People argue that Nightmare is still usable in well, not usable, but like there's other alternatives for it in Despia. They're worse though. Like, yes, it'd be nice if they just banned Sanctifier, which is the bigger problem, but them hitting Nightmare still makes the alternatives not as effective, right? The alternatives being like the Unity Requiem, which, by the way, if ever became playable, people could just play Machinex to beat, like if it became popular. Side deck one card to beat it sounds fantastic. Or DD Orthros, which is not searchable off Grand Guignol, which is huge because that makes the combos way worse and way less consistent and more vulnerable. All huge things to hurting a deck. So I do think this is still a good hit, even if it doesn't disable these FTKs altogether. Yugioh for similar veins. Now, there are many other cards like Featherstorm and Shifter that I reckon have no place existing in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! That need to be here, but like I said, I'll take what I can get, and I'm happy we're getting progress. It shows that at least what we say isn't always just falling on deaf ears, which is important. It means we should keep yelling at Konami because eventually they'll listen, right? I hope. I think. That's kind of everything that I wanted to talk about. The ramifications of the ban list and the event are kind of far and wide. There's a lot that happened, and even though the ban list can feel like nothing because like a lot of the cards that got unreleased will have zero effect. I'll say that outright. As well as the limits and bans weren't overly impactful. There's still a lot to change, a lot of philosophy to discuss, and Yu-Gi-Oh has had a huge weekend in its history. Still, let me know what you guys think. If there are any of these talking points that you disagreed with, or if I missed anything important that was worth discussing, comments below. I do read the comments, and if you bring up an interesting enough point, maybe I'll respond, engage in some discussions, because it can be fun to speculate and talk about Yu-Gi-Oh. That's why we're here, right? Anyways, that's gonna be all for now, guys. I'll see you guys all next time with more TCG and Master Duel content. Peace.